بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وأنكحوا الأيام منكم والصالحين من عبادكم وإمائكم إن يكونوا فقراء يغنهم الله من فضله والله واسع عليم وليستعفف الذين لا يجدون نكاحا حتى يغنيهم الله من فضله والذين يبتغون الكتاب مما ملكت أيمانكم فكاتبوهم إن علمتم فيهم خيرا وآتوهم مما لله الذي آتاكم ولا تكرهوا فتياتكم على البغاء إن أردنا تحصنا لتبتغوا عرض الحياة الدنيا ومن يكرهن فإن الله من بعد إكراههن غفور رحيم ولقد أنزلنا إليكم آيات مبينات ومثلا من الذين خلوا من قبلكم وموعظة للمتقين الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم صدق الله العظيم.
ما شاء الله اللهم بارك بارك الله فيك. Okay, now the talk will take place by Sheikh Fawzan inshallah, juz by juz inshallah from there.
you coming back or did you start? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله رب زدني علما رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Today inshallah we have a short summary of juz number 19, continuing from the juz by juz summary. The first surah we have with us is Surah Al-Furqan. Surah Al-Furqan is a late Makki surah, which is the position of the majority of the Salaf, even though there are some of the Sahabi who have mentioned a few ayat that come and fall into the Madani verses, but the majority of the Salaf, they said it is a Makki surah, and that speaks about Allah Azza wa Jal's favor upon us by sending down Al-Furqan. Furqan is another word for Quran. Quran has many names. Among it is Furqan, Huda, Shifa. So among the names of Al-Quran is Furqan. The Furqan means the criterion, that which separates truth from falsehood. So farraqa yufarriqu from the Arabic language means to separate truth from falsehood. And we know it is a Makki surah based on the topic of the surah, which is on mainly around Tawheed in Allah Azza wa Jal, warning us from the ways of the mushrikeen and those who have taken false gods, and them being stubborn with our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam by asking him for miracles in a stubborn manner. The primary purpose of this surah is to glorify Allah Azza wa Jal and to affirm the prophethood to our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And one of the sub-themes of the surah is also to describe the characteristics of Ibadur Rahman, who are the servants of Allah Azza wa Jal, the close servants of Allah Azza wa Jal. The surah starts off with a verse: تبارك الذي نزل الفرقان على عبده ليكون للعالمين نذيرا. It is just the second verse of the second surah that only starts with Tabarak. We have along with Surah Al-Mulk that we will recite every night. And the word Tabarak, it means that Allah Azza wa Jal, He is exalted in every manner. He is above His creation. And it comes from the word Barakah. When you say Barakah, if you attribute the word Barakah to anything, it means it is full of khair and blessing. Meaning, a masjid is makanul mubarak. Why? Because what you do in the mosque is not like what you do outside. We have al-Haramain al-Sharifain, these are amakin mubarakah, whereby if you were to do a certain deed, certain act of worship, it's not like how you do outside. Similarly with timing, we have a certain times which are also mubarak, like Shahr Ramadan al-Mubarak. The ibadat you do now, it's not like what you do outside. Also, for example, after Salat al-Fajr, Waqtul Mubarak, the rewards, the blessings, they extend with you for a long time. So the word, this is where Allah is describing Himself by saying, تَبَارَكَ الَّذِي نَزَّلَ الْفُرْقَانِ, that blessed is the one who sent down the decisive authority, Al-Furqan, عَلَى عَبْدِهِ ay the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, so that he may be a warner to the whole world. This is the main theme of the surah. And it begins by listing some of the reasons why those who rejected him, why did they reject him? It mainly comes down to four main reasons. First thing, وَاتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِهِ آلِهَةً, that they took false gods. They did shirk. They had other. They took other beings as their gods alongside Allah Azza wa Jal. And if you were to ask them why do you do that, they say we're doing that so we can get closer to Him. Number two, they claim that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a liar. وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِنْ هَذَا إِلَّا إِفْكٌ افْتَرَاهُ, that he's just something he's making up. Number three, they claim that he's just a storyteller. قَالُوا أَسَاطِيرُ الْأَوَّلِينَ, asatir comes from the word story as well, but if we take it back to the Latin language. So asatir is something that اكتتبها فهي تملى عليه بكرة وأصيلا, is something he's making up and as if day and night, is these stories, these fables, fake stories are being revealed to him, and this is exactly what he's telling us. And number 4, they say he's just a regular man. وقالوا ما لهذا الرسول يأكل الطعام ويمشي في الأسواق. That he's just a regular man who eats and drinks and he goes to the market like the rest of us. How come he hasn't got an angel with him to support him in his cause? Meaning, and the thing is, this is the sunnah of the Prophet and all the Prophets before him, that they live like the people with them, and they don't take the deen as a ladder to reach their dunyawi aims. This is the sunnah of the Prophets, all the previous Prophets, that you be like the common people around you, you be like the people in your community. You don't take deen as a wasil, as a means to reach wealth, to reach fame, to reach power, to reach sultan. Because this is what the people of Quraysh, this is what their state. They are people of luxury, power and status. And they couldn't fathom, that they couldn't imagine that how can you follow a person who's doing what the regular people are doing. We do that as well. So we want him to be higher than us. And the problem with that is, if he was something like that, they would be following him for their own gains. If he was a rich man, they would follow him for his money. If he was a powerful man, they would follow him for his power. So the ittiba' of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wouldn't be pure. And then we move on to, the surah moves on to some of the talks about those who deny the day of judgment and describe what will happen to them, and those who are resurrected and what will happen when they meet Allah Azza wa Jal. And this was before the juz. So now we are going into the actual juz, because the surah, it starts in the previous juz 18. But tonight, inshallah, from juz 19 we'll start from وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ لَا يَرْجُونَ لِقَاءَنَا. We have a very an important verse here, where Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَيَوْمَ يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا. That on that day, الْمُلْكُ يَوْمَئِذٍ الْحَقُّ لِلرَّحْمَنِ. That when Allah Azza wa Jal says to everyone that this day belongs to me, Allah, there's no going back. وَيَوْمَ يَعَضُّ الظَّالِمُ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ. This is an expression, a ta'bir, that person who regrets what he has done, he's going to be biting his fingers. يَقُولُ يَا لَيْتَنِي اتَّخَذْتُ مَعَ الرَّسُولِ سَبِيلًا. If only I had taken the path of the Prophet ﷺ, if only I had just been on the same journey as him. يَا وَيْلَتَى لَيْتَنِي لَمْ أَتَّخِذْ فُلَانًا خَلِيلًا. A very powerful message. If only I hadn't taken such and such as a friend. You know, Allah was saying such and such, fulan. I mean, it could be anyone. That person on the day of judgment, the person that you've been following, the celebrities, the influencers, whoever it is that influences your life, that changes, that has motivated you in your life, inspired you to do what you do in your life. But then later on you find out that that person has taken you to Jahannam. The only thing they can say is, Ya laytani, if only I didn't take such and such. He's not going to name him. He won't even name him because of his disgust. لَقَدْ أَضَلَّنِي عَنِ الذِّكْرِ بَعْدَ إِذْ جَاءَنِي وَكَانَ الشَّيْطَانُ لِلْإِنسَانِ خَذُولًا. This is the sifa of shaitan. He is khadul. What does khadul mean? Someone who takes you. In the last minute, he goes, ma'as-salam. He does a U-turn and he leaves you to be. These are the traps of shaitan. So neglecting. Then وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ, the ayah after that, وَقَالَ الرَّسُولُ يَا رَبِّي إِنَّ قَوْمِ اتَّخَذُوا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ مَهْجُورًا. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he will say to Allah Azza wa Jal, that, oh, Ya Allah, my people have neglected the Quran. The neglecting the Quran is of 3 types. Number 1, you either neglect it by not reciting it. You don't venerate it. And we know that the Quran is something which is very unique. It's something that will leave you the moment you leave it for a second, if you were to say. Yani, if you were to be hastened towards it, it will come to you. If you were to leave it, it will leave you. Number 2, in neglecting the Quran is not taking from its lessons by doing tadabbur, which is from the characteristics of the munafiqeen, of the hypocrites. That a person, he is only prevented tadabbur. Why? Due to his sins. The more you sin, the more harder your heart will become, the more heavier it will become. The heavier heart, it cannot withstand the tadabbur of the Quran. And number 3, the type of neglecting is not acting upon the Quran, and the greatest, which is the greatest of the 3, because action upon the Quran is the whole purpose of reciting. But the Quraysh, they went a step further. by not just neglecting the Quran, by describing it as fables as we mentioned, and they didn't take him as a role model. So the person who doesn't take Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as a role model, the person who abandons the Quran, he will regret it on the Day of Judgment. But instead what we were supposed to do is take him as an ultimate role model, so we are able to attain his intercession. And then Allah, He goes on to mention the stories of the prophets. He mentions of the past nations of Musa alayhi salam, and how they were blessed, and how what they've been given, all the blessings they've been given, and they were what? Ungrateful. So they were destroyed. And then He goes on to mention some of the blessings given us about the sun and the moon and the shade. But imagine the sun was in one position whereby one part of the earth would never get any sunlight, and the other part always get sunlight. So these are all ni'am that we live on a day-to-day basis. The night comes and then the day comes. We don't count it. Why? Because it's just tabi'i, it's natural. And after mentioning all these blessings, He subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the ayah of sajda towards the end of the surah, that when it is said to them to prostrate and to Ar-Rahman, they reject. Why? Because the Quraysh, they rejected the name Ar-Rahman. And the person who rejects one of Allah's names is as if he has rejected all His names. You don't take bit by bit. Islam is as a whole. You take it or you leave it. This is why we show in our actions, with this ayah recited, what do? We do sajda straight away. Why? We humble ourselves in front of Allah Azza wa Jal. Finally, we come to the end of the surah, and in verse 61, about وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ, who are the servants of Allah Azza wa Jal. وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ, here we find about 10, 11, 12 different characteristics of these people. I will go into a bit of detail inshallah because of the importance of these characteristics. So the real servants of Ar-Rahman, who are they? They are those who walk with humility. They're not harsh, they're not mean, they're not nasty, they don't have bad akhlaq, they don't have ego when they deal with people. Yeah, if you look at majority of the people, these are the characteristics that we hold. Ego is a big thing that we can't let go of. So when you do change your ways, when you do become humble and you walk with humility, literally you walk with humility, you don't even show any ounce of takabbur, of ego in your actions, you will instantly gain the minds and the hearts of the foolish people. Yeah, someone wants to argue with you, someone wants to cause fitna with you. What do? You don't give him the upper hand. You remain that humble slave. Eventually they will turn around and become like you, inshallah. Among the characteristics are those who prostrate at night time, the tahajjud prayer. Because the one who prays tahajjud, why does Allah just mention tahajjud specifically? Why is tahajjud is intended? Why not the other salat? Because the person who prays tahajjud on a day-to-day basis, of course, the other salawat is even more important. So he's of course going to do them as well. And we know it's mujma' upon, it's the consensus that the nawafil of the layl, of the night time, are more important than the nawafil of the daytime. And also those who pray and they always say, oh Allah, keep us away from the hellfire. Always constantly make this dua of keeping away from the hellfire. Also those who spend moderately, they don't waste money whereby they feel extra pious and they want to give to charity, etc., but they're neglecting their family members. Or neither are they stingy when it comes to giving. So you be moderate in your spending. You look after your family and you always constantly give. And one way you could practice that is after salawat. Every time you have a salah, you want your salah to be accepted, you follow good deeds after good deeds with another good deed. So the scholars, they mentioned it is mustahab to, when you leave the masjid, you give some sadaqah. Maybe that sadaqah will fill in that hole you had in your salah, because there's no guarantee that your salah was accepted. There's no guarantee that you just prayed, for example, it was 100% perfect. You're never going to know that. So what do? This is why we make the ad'iyah and we follow a good deed after a good deed. So one can take the other up all the way to Allah Azza wa Jal. And then we have those who take human life except lawfully, those who commit major sins. These are the people who do not do these actions, are among the Ibadur Rahman. Also we have those who do not lie and bear false witnesses, shahadatul zur. Imam Qatada, he mentions something. It's a very simple expression that he mentions, but it's overlooked. He says, Imam Qatada says, don't say I saw when you haven't seen. Don't say I've heard when you haven't heard. Don't say I know when you don't know. Why? Because Allah Azza wa Jalla will ask you, or He will question you on every single word that's come out of your mouth. And it is something overlooked because why? It's such a trivial issue. Also, those who pass by falsehood, frivolous matters, they pass with dignity. Those when reminded of Allah Azza wa Jal, when He's reminded of, when they're given nasa'ih, when they're given reminders, their heart, they don't feel any anger towards that person who's giving them the nasiha. They accept it wholeheartedly. And then those who pray and say, "Oh Lord, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً Oh Lord, give us spouses. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيا هَبْ لَنَا مِنْ أَزْوَاجِنَا وَذُرِّيَّاتِنَا قُرَّةَ أَعْيُنٍ وَاجْعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا Oh our Lord, give us spouses and children that will be a comfort of our eyes, the coolness of our souls, and make us a good example for the righteous people. Because it is upon every single one of us, it's not just among the imams or the higher people or the people of status in the community to be examples of people. Every single one of us should be aiming to become an example for whoever we meet. Yet no one is above one another. وَجَعَلْنَا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ إِمَامًا Make us an example, make us an inspiration for others. And this dua you repeat, but Allah is giving, He mentions this dua at the end. Meaning, if you want this dua to be accepted, you have to follow up with all the things before it. All these characteristics we'll be mentioning. If you were to read the surah, you will see it in detail as well. You follow all these good deeds and all these, you stay away from all this haram, and then you constantly make this dua. That's when you'll become a true example, a true believer. Then the surah is concluded by saying, قُلْ مَا يَعْبَأُ بِكُمْ رَبِّي لَوْلَا دُعَاؤُكُمْ فَقَدْ كَذَّبْتُمْ فَسَوْفَ يَكُونُ لِزَامًا So Allah Azza wa Jalla, He concludes by saying that the Quraysh, even though, despite the idolatry, despite their rejection of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, despite their persecution of the Muslims, when they, once upon a time, they showed a tiny amount of religiosity during a harsh time, they called upon to Allah Azza wa Jalla. Because of that small dua that they made, because of that small religiosity that they had, they are still alive. Allah is telling them, you are still alive, and I have not sent down the punishment I have sent down for Ad and Thamud, all the people of the previous nations. You are still in your comfortable state. But because you've rejected it now, I've been giving you chances after chances, the inevitable will take place, which is your punishment. So if these Quraysh, people of Quraysh, who've done what they've done, but because of some small deeds, small du'as they've made, like a small percentage of religiosity that they had in their heart, because of that they were prevented from witnessing the punishment of Allah in this dunya. So what about us? What about the Muslims? So if they can survive with such minimum effort, what about us who inshallah we do and we want to fall under the characteristics of Ibadur Rahman? So you constantly make dua, Ya Allah, make me from the Ibadur Rahman, and you try to memorize and you try to include these verses in your dua. Then we move on to inshallah Surah Ash-Shu'ara, which is also a Meccan surah, and with very small and powerful verses. And it makes it roughly about one of the largest surahs in the Quran, even though it's only 7 pages. But in terms of ayat, it has about 227 ayat. And this surah is just full of what? Stories. And you see a pattern in these stories. When every time Allah mentions a story, He mentions the people, He mentions the previous nations and the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions their case, the da'wah that he had given, and then him being rejected. What is the end of it? إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً وَمَا كَانَ أَكْثَرُهُمْ مُؤْمِنِينَ وَإِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَهُوَ الْعَزِيزُ الرَّحِيمُ That indeed in this story that's just been mentioned are many signs, ayat and signs that most of them did not believe, but truly your Lord is full of power and all-wise. So we have the story of Musa alayhi salam, whereby he has this conversation with Fir'aun, and it shows you the characteristic of the mushrikeen, of the kuffar, which is unanimously agreed upon, which is they are the same every place, they're the same. Meaning when Fir'aun, when he came back to him after growing up, he's trying to remind him of the favors. Fir'aun is trying to remind Musa of the favors that he's done for him, saying, we raised you amongst us, you lived in our palace, etc. And then yet you killed this Egyptian, that man he had killed. Why should he accept what you've come with? So Musa alayhi salam, he admits his mistake. And this is what is another characteristic we can learn from the actions of Musa alayhi salam. That when you do a wrong, you know you did wrong, so you admit it. He says, yes, I was from the Dallin. Yes, I made a mistake. But who are you to talk, O Fir'aun? How are you catching me out on one thing that I did when you've killed thousands of people? You've murdered thousands of babies, etc. And now you want to threaten me with prison, etc. So this is the characteristic of the Yani Fir'aun. He's like the worst kafir, the worst of the disbelievers to ever have lived. And he's calling Musa alayhi salam a kafir. Can you imagine how he's trying to flip the table? So what happens is, and then he brings the story of Musa alayhi salam being chased with his people, and whereby they reach the river or the sea, and you have this huge army behind them, and the people are worrying, what are we going to do to Musa? What does he say? His firm faith that my Lord is with me, he's going to be my support, inshallah. Straight firm. And that same Lord that protected Musa from such a huge army, from such a danger, he's the same Lord that you and I worship every day and night. So never ever feel like I don't have that thing I don't have someone to call to. Yes, you do. If Musa alayhi salam called to Allah Azza wa Jal, it's the same Lord that has protected him, will protect us as well. So he says, and Allah Azza wa Jal tells him to hit the water with his stick, and the sea it splits into half like two big mountains. So as soon as he's passed, as soon as Fir'aun and his army come in, they come down crashing and destroy everyone and that were left behind. And then we have the story of Ibrahim. And Ibrahim, he mentions some very beautiful du'as that he mentioned that Allah has created him and guided him and he fed him and he gives him water and drink. He's counting Allah's blessings upon him. But when it comes to mentioning his illness, he doesn't say, oh, Allah makes me ill. He attributes the illness to himself. And when I become ill, he gives me shifa and he gives me death, he gives me life, he resurrects me as well. And then he, at the end, after mentioning all his blessings, he says, after all this, Ya Allah, I ask you to give me the opportunity. I hope that you make me among those who are those who have been forgiven. He is a prophet of Allah Azza wa Jal, and he's asking Allah Azza wa Jal, after everything that you've done for me, I hope that you make me among those who are forgiven. Again, this is adab. He's teaching us adab of dua, that you don't hold Allah to account. That Allah, I did such and such in this day, in this night, in this Ramadan, I've done, for example, 20 Ramadans. So I'm sure I have a good list of good deeds that I've done, so I'm sure you're going to forgive me. You don't hold Allah to account. What happens if you hold Allah to account, day of judgment, He's going to hold you to account. And finally, he asks Allah for a pure heart, because that's literally the only thing that's going to save you in day of judgment. Having a pure heart, nothing else. You can come with all your wealth, everything, but your heart was qasi, your heart was not pure. So you will disgrace. So we ask Allah to not allow us to go through that disgrace on the day of judgment. On the day of judgment. Then he brings the stories of Surah of Sayyidina Nuh, Sayyidina Hud, and Salih, and then he ends it with Lut, Shu'aib, and then finally, I don't want to go into detail because of timing, the story of the poets. Back in the days, in the time of Quraysh, poetry was a very widespread thing. For example, refuting someone, you want to curse someone, you want to praise someone, you want to speak good of someone, you want to speak ill of someone. What did they used to do? They used to use poetry. Yeah, and the poets, they had certain characteristics about them, meaning they would wander without any goal or purpose. Why? Because it's just entertainment for them. For them, it's a joke. So they would curse the Prophet and they would call him names, etc. So what did the Prophet ﷺ tell his Sahaba? He handpicked one or two of his Sahaba and he told them to attack them. But use what they have used. Use the poetry and attack them as well. And then we come on to Surah Al-Naml, which is the Surah, Naml means the Surah of the ant, because it's a story that's mentioned with Sulaiman alayhi salam. And this Surah Al-Naml is also similar time to Surah Al-Shura, Surah Al-Shu'ara, which was also revealed in Mecca. And some verses are in Madani verses as well. It consists of 93 verses. The larger half falling in these Jews and the smaller half falling in the next Jews coming. And the primary goal is to prove revelation of Muhammad again, and to prove the Day of Judgment and the importance of knowledge. We will see, inshallah. And the Surah Al-Naml begins by describing those who believe and those who do not believe in Allah Azza wa Jal. And it moves on straight to the story of Musa alayhi salam, where Allah Azza wa Jal says, when he finally gets to meet him and speak to him, Ya Musa innahu ana Allahu al-Azizul Hakim. O Moses, it is truly I am Allah the Almighty, the All-Wise. And then he goes on to the story of Sulaiman. And the repetition of surah, some people ask, why is the story of Surah Musa, why is it's common, everyone knows, why is it always repeated in every single, or in every other surah? This is also like a strategy of actual talab al-ilm, which means knowing how to study, repetition. One surah Allah could have mentioned it once and it's enough, but He brings it, keeps bringing it, meaning, but it doesn't mean that each time it's the same thing. The Quran doesn't have a single harf or single letter that is as in that has no meaning. Every single letter came at its right place, and it has a specific meaning. It tackles a certain angle of the story. Then we move on to the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam and his incident with the queen Sheba. And this is the only surah that describes her. Allah Azza wa Jalla, He mentions before going into the story with her and Sheba, with Sulaiman alayhi salam and the queen. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا دَاوُودَ وَسُلَيْمَانَ عِلْمًا وَقَالَ الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ الَّذِي فَضَّلَنَا عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّنْ عِبَادِهِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. That indeed we have granted knowledge to David and Solomon. And they said in acknowledgement, Alhamdulillah, who has privileged us over many of His faithful servants. Again, what did this show? The fadl, the virtue of seeking knowledge. That when you seek knowledge, automatically your status is lifted. And then he mentions, it goes into the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam, وَقَالَ يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ عُلِّمْنَا مَنْطِقَ الطَّيْرِ. O people, we have been taught the language of the birds. وَأُوتِينَا مِنْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ إِنَّ هَذَا لَهُوَ الْفَضْلُ الْمُبِينُ. And we have been given everything that we need. This is indeed a great privilege. Another thing we extract from this dua is showing gratitude in times of ease, which is something we all struggle with. That only when calamity befalls us, we want to turn to Allah Azza wa Jal. But when we are at a time of ease, we have good health, we have time on our hands, we take it for granted. This is why the hadith that if you were to remember Allah in your times of ease, He's going to remember you in the times of hardship. So when Sulaiman alayhi salam and his army are marching along, you have the story of the Naml, the ant. He heard a voice of the ant warning his colony to be wary of Sulaiman and his army lest they be trampled on. So Sulaiman alayhi salam, he heard that because he had the knowledge. He could hear and he could understand them. So he heard the ant and he smiled and he laughed at the ant's word. Then he said, "My Lord, direct me to be thankful for the blessings you have bestowed upon me and upon my..." And he's asking Allah Azza wa Jal to admit me by your grace into the company of your virtuous servants. He's a prophet, but he's still making dua. Again, just lessons and reminders for us to take there as motivation, and that regardless of what you are, you will always be in need of dua to Allah Azza wa Jal. And then we have the story of him, alayhi salam, and giving da'wah to the people of the Queen Sheba. And she was a famous queen who was well known in Arabian history. He sends a letter with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim written on it. And as soon as it came to her, she knew this was a thing of value. It didn't come from any person. It came from an important place. She uses the word Kareem. And then she tried to bribe Sulaiman alayhi salam to give him a gift, to kind of test him to see if he's being genuine or if he's being like the previous muluk, the previous kings. Because this was the aada, the custom of kings. When they would go into a country and they would take over, they would get all the people of high status, and they would disgrace them. So this is what she was fearing. And then, so Sulaiman alayhi salam, so she sent him with gifts. And then as soon as it arrived, he said, "Do you think you can convince me to give me gifts where Allah Azza wa Jal, He's giving me something far more greater? Yeah, He's giving me hidayah, for example. He's giving me ilm. He's giving me much more than what you can offer me." So he sent back and he asked them to come to him. And while they were on the journey, he asked his followers, "Can one of you go and bring her throne to me?" So one of the afarit from the jinns who have been given extreme power, they said, "Yes, I can do so. I can go and bring her throne while you're doing your duties as a king." But then a man who was also given some sort of knowledge, we don't know the nature of this knowledge, he intervened and said, "No, but I can bring it to you before you even blink." So this was the power that Allah had given. It does fall under karamat al-awliya. He wasn't a prophet, but he was just a regular man. There's not much been written about him. So he went and brought the brought the throne before the queen had arrived herself. And when she comes and sees it, and she's astonished. So, and then she realizes this is another lesson by what we can learn is people who, inside her, she had an amount of faith. But it was because of the people around her, they are the ones who prevented her from actually accepting the guidance. And this is what we even see nowadays as well. That people you fear, that when you're not in when you haven't received guidance, you have this fear that, if I enter Islam, I'm going to lose my position, I'm going to lose certain friends, I'm going to lose my family, I'm going to lose a certain job. But this is where the sacrifice comes in. That in fact, it's been instilled in her, she has the faith in her, but she's been prevented by these secondary issues around her. And then Allah Azza wa Jal goes to the people of Salih, and He mentions about the ability to carve their homes from the mountains. And they also challenged Allah Azza wa Jal for a miracle. So Allah Azza wa Jal, He created a camel from the mountains. And then there were about 9 evil people who tried to come up with a plan to kill the Prophet Salih alayhi salam. And what was the consequences of their actions? فَتِلْكَ بُيُوتِهِمْ خَاوِيَةً بِمَا ظَلَمُوا إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لِقَوْمٍ يَعْلَمُونَ. That their homes are still there, but they're completely ruined because of their wrongdoing. Surely in this is a lesson for people of knowledge. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, He has enabled for these homes to be in its exact state. Or if you were to go to these places, you will see it. And then we finally move on to the story of Lut alayhi salam. And this was been covered before, but one thing that was mentioned in this specific surah, about his story, was when he called to them to leave the fawahish, to leave the evil act that they are involved in. فَمَا كَانَ جَوَابَ قَوْمِهِ إِلَّا أَنْ قَالُوا أَخْرِجُوا آلَ لُوطٍ مِنْ قَرْيَتِكُمْ إِنَّهُمْ أُنَاسٌ يَتَطَهَّرُونَ. That expelled the followers of Lut and himself from your land. Because why? Because there are people who wish to remain chaste. So what can you learn from the story? Is that you have some people who want to commit evil, but they admit it. They admit that, this is something wrong. I shouldn't do it. It's a deficiency inside me, but inshallah, I hope to rectify myself in the future. You have those type of people. And then you have people like these, who not only they don't even think about removing themselves from this environment, but they want it to be widespread. They want to remain filthy, and they want to prevent those who want to bring corruption to an end. Because why? Because they hate to be chaste and they hate to be clean. So this was the state of the people of Lut alayhi salam, and they were of course severely punished for their actions. And so we have a certain adab that we know and we've learned from these of these stories in these 3 surahs. It's a common theme that the Prophet ﷺ, whether it's him, whether it's the previous Anbiya, they give da'wah to the people, they present the case, and they get ridiculed. What do? Straight to Allah Azza wa Jal, constant dua. So we ask Allah Azza wa Jal to enable us to take a lesson from these stories of the Quran and learn to show gratitude for the blessings that we've been given and that He has bestowed upon us. Wa akhiru da'wana and alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.